It is the middle of the night in Bournemouth, 1885. A man is thrashing in his bed. He's crying out in his sleep, tossing violently. His wife, alarmed, shakes him awake. He opens his eyes, looks furiously at his wife and says, "Why did you wake me? I was dreaming a fine bogey tale." Hello, I'm your Director of Studies, and today we're stepping into the fog-choked streets of Victorian London to explore that very bogey tale. It's a story written in just a few feverish days, a story that shocked its first readers to the core, and a story that gave the English language a brand new phrase for a split personality. We are looking at Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But is it actually scary? Because today everyone knows the twist. You literally can't say Jekyll without someone else saying Hyde. It's on cartoons, it's in films. Hasn't the shock worn off? That is the brilliant paradox of this novella. Yes, the spoiler is out. We all know that the respectable Dr. Jekyll and the monstrous Mr. Hyde are the same person. But Stevenson didn't actually write a story about a monster. He wrote a psychological thriller about us. He wrote about the terrifying possibility that civilization is just a mask, and underneath it, we are all hiding something horrific. So reading it now isn't about figuring out who Hyde is, it's about figuring out what he represents. Exactly. If you read this book just for the plot twist, you're missing the point. To get top marks, and honestly just to enjoy the genius of the book, you have to look at the shadows. You have to understand the deeply hypocritical world that created Henry Jekyll, and the terrifying scientific theories that birthed Edward Hyde. Setting the scene. Picture late 19th century London. Not the postcard version. A city smothered in thick brown smog. A pea souper. Right, the fog that gets into your throat and eyes. Precisely. And that fog is the perfect metaphor for Victorian society. On the surface, the middle and upper classes were obsessed with respectability. Reputation was everything. You went to the right church, wore the right clothes, and were seen with the right people. But it was a front, wasn't it? Respectable gentlemen doing horrors behind closed doors. Exactly. That double life is the novella's central theme. In the West End, you had Cavendish Square, grand houses, brilliant doctors, polished silver. A few streets away was Soho, slums, gin palaces, crime and poverty. Stevenson builds this duality into the architecture of Jekyll's house. Oh, the doors. The front is beautiful and respectable, but the back door, Hyde's door, is blistered and disdained, blind and windowless in a dingy side street. Same building, two faces, just like its owner. Jekyll wants to walk with his head high in public, while plunging into his undignified pleasures. And he invents a potion to separate the two. He outsources his sin to another body. He thinks he can. He thinks Hyde can commit atrocities, while Dr. Jekyll's conscience stays clean. Mr. Enfield's first story tells us what that looks like. A man trampling calmly over a young girl's body. He describes him as a juggernaut, not even human, an unstoppable mechanical force of destruction. And what does Hyde do after he's caught? He goes through that blistered door, returns with a cheque from a highly respectable gentleman, and buys his way out. Wealth covering violence. Respectability paying off sin. It's the Victorian nightmare laid bare. So, if the book is about Victorian hypocrisy, where does the science come in? Jekyll is a doctor, Lanyon is a doctor. It feels like science is what actually ruins everything.
Absolutely.
To understand the sheer terror of this book, you have to remember what was happening in the real world. In 1859, a few decades before Stevenson wrote this, Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species, Evolution, which basically told the deeply religious Victorians that they weren't angels crafted by God, but rather highly developed apes. And they hated it. Darwin's theory terrified them, because if we evolved from beasts, could we devolve? Could we go backwards? Stevenson plays directly on this primal fear. Listen to the way Hyde is described by every character who meets him. He's smaller than Jekyll. He's dwarfish. He has ape-like fury. He moves with animal terror. Yes, Hyde isn't a magical demon. He is the primitive, savage, unevolved animal that lives inside every civilized human being. Jekyll hasn't created a new person. He has simply stripped away centuries of evolution and societal manners to reveal the beast within. Which is why Dr. Lanyon reacts so terribly when he sees Hyde transform back into Jekyll. Lanyon is a traditional, rational scientist. He calls Jekyll's work unscientific balderdash. Lanyon's worldview is grounded in rules, order, and God. When he watches Hyde drink the potion, when he sees the grotesque, melting transformation of flesh from monster back to respectable gentleman, it breaks his mind. He actually dies of shock, doesn't he? He does, because Lanyon realises the horrifying truth. The beast isn't out there in the dark alleys of Soho. The beast is us. Science, in Jekyll's hands, has bypassed God completely and unlocked pure evil. It's a perversion of medicine. One of the most brilliant choices Stevenson makes in this novella isn't about what he shows us, it's about what he hides.
What do you mean? We see the trampling of the girl. We see the murder of Sir Danvers Carew.
But we don't see the worst of it. Look at the structure of the narrative. We don't get Jekyll's own point of view until the very last chapter, Henry Jekyll's full statement of the case. For most of the book, we are following Mr. Utterson.
Utterson, the most boring man in London. He's a lawyer, he's dusty, he never smiles, he drinks gin alone to stop himself craving fine wine.
He is aggressively boring, but that's the genius of it. Utterson is our detective. He represents Victorian rationality. He is trying to solve the mystery of Hyde using logic, wills, and legal documents. But he is entirely unequipped to understand something as deeply irrational and evil as Edward Hyde.
And because we are stuck with Utterson, we only hear rumours of what Hyde is actually doing. Jekyll mentions Hyde's undignified pleasures, but he never tells us what they are.
Exactly. Stevenson leaves Hyde's deepest sins completely blank. He gives us the murder of Carew, yes, but the rest, the things Hyde does in the dead of night that make him so loathsome, left to the imagination. And your imagination will always conjure something far worse than anything Stevenson could print on a page in 1886.
So the horror is actually in the silence. It's in the things the respectable gentlemen refuse to say out loud.
Repression. The Victorians repressed their desires, and Stevenson represses the details. And what happens when you repress something for too long?
It explodes.
It explodes. Jekyll thinks he can control Hyde. He thinks he can put the monster back in the box whenever he wants. But the shadow self grows stronger. Soon, Jekyll is waking up in his own bed, looking down at his hand and seeing the hairy, knobbly knuckles of Edward Hyde. The monster has taken over.
The strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde ends in tragedy. The respectable doctor is destroyed by the very shadow he tried to separate from himself. He locked himself in his cabinet, weeping like a lost soul, until there was nothing left but Hyde, a vial of poison, and the bitter end. It's a warning, isn't it? If you don't accept your dark side, it will eventually destroy you. It is. Stevenson looked at the polite, top-hatted society of Victorian London, and he held up a terrifying mirror. He forced them, and forces us, to ask, what are you capable of if you knew you would never be caught? If you had a different face, a different name, a back door in a dingy alley, what would you do? The genius of Stevenson is that he doesn't give us an easy answer, but he does give us one of the greatest masterpieces of English literature. This audio was brought to you by your Director of Studies. If you enjoyed this content and want to ensure you get top marks in your literature exams, we have exactly what you need. We have other premium, in-depth content where we cover all the core themes, do deep dives into the characters, and break down GCSE exam board specifics so you know exactly how to write your essays. Head over to directorofstudies.com to unlock your full potential. Until next time, keep reading, keep questioning, and whatever you do, beware the fog.